You all join pause. Repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all here. Anyone here for the first time? A couple of you, what brings you here for the first time? These two. What'd they tell you?
I meditate a lot, but I've never been here. They said that was a great experience.
Nice.
They lie.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. Who else for the first time? Why? Yeah. You want to share?
Yeah, so we're part of an anthropology class, basically just determining the history of religion, it's supernatural. So essentially we're writing a paper on our experiences of getting our feet wet, so to speak, in anyone else's religious background. So
Yeah.
it's anything that's we didn't grow up with, we chose. So it's pretty simple.
Right on. Well, I'll warn you, even though we chatted a little bit about this outside, I didn't say this part, that I got started 16 years ago doing the exact same thing you're doing right now. So this is your free pass. I'll even sign your stuff and say you were here. So you're welcome to leave now. Otherwise, you are, you're at risk of having this ruin the rest of your life. But I'm glad you're here. Nice to meet you all. But that's a true story. 16 years ago, my friend said, Jeff, you always say you're Buddhist. You've never been to a temple. And she was a student at San Diego State, where you are, and had to observe a religious experience somewhere. And I tagged along with her. So here I am. Yeah. So welcome. Anyone else for the first time want to share why they're here? That might be it, new people. Anyone keep coming back? Want to share why they keep coming back? Other than Bruce? It's a really hard one for you, I know.
Me too.
Yeah, no, you're good.
I'm here to change my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's working slowly but surely.
What's wrong with your current mind?
Well, the one I'm sitting right in this very moment, in the present, is fine. But it's it has a mind of its own.
Yes, your mind has a mind of its own.
So,
And whose mind is that?
I know.
There's a sutra, the Sangama Sutra, where the Buddha asks the disciple to find where is the mind, like where is it? Is it in your head, is it in your arms, your knees, your feet, like where is the actual mind?
Is there an answer to this story?
I'll save you the reading. He never finds it. Yeah, but not in a way that you would think you've never found your mind.
What sutra is it?
Sangama Sutra. All right, so glad you're all here. Let's start with a meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin, especially if you're new. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. We won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Right? Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working? Is it not working? You're doing it right, you're doing it wrong. We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds. People cough, phones ring, people get up. This is life. Life is filled with chaos and sounds. And so the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Most important, don't expect anything from this. If you're sitting there waiting for some grand aha moments or some deep realizations or some huge religious experience, you're probably going to be extremely disappointed. We're just going to sit and breathe for a few moments. I'll guide us as we begin. Posture, if you're on the cushions, often helps sliding in the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten, shoulders are relaxed, hands can be on the knees or in the lap. Chairs or benches also just trying to sit up straight. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, just means your leg hurts. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little silence. And starting with your eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. Oh, yeah. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply going to continue this practice, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. And with the body still, resting, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important for the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. And ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. Realize however you feel now, it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with our own mind and our own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than anyone in this room, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means for all of us in this room, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get every day. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, and disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. Training the mind to be present is probably the most difficult thing you ever have to train. But it's also the most important. Taking care of mental, emotional health, and well-being is the foundation of everything you do in your life. Friends, family, work, school, lack thereof, all of that, whatever you do, starts with your mind. We spend so much time trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. Why did they do this? Why did they do that? So much time lost in trying to control other people's thoughts and actions, and very little time spent on controlling our mind and our reaction to what's going on around us. It's a practice. It's not a 6-week course. It's not something that, in 2 years you say, oh, I'm done. This is a lifelong practice. It's figuring out every day that what you think, what you say, and what you do determines your reality in your world. And the way you respond to everybody is extremely important. Beginning to understand that everybody's living their life the way they think they should live it. Just like we are living our lives the way we think we should live it. The challenge is we don't always think that everybody else is okay to live their life the way they want to. But somehow think we should be okay living our lives the way we want to. So when we begin to kind of recognize that the ego and the pride and the stories we're telling ourselves our whole lives about how we think the world should be, when you work on removing some of that, tends to make it a little more gentle, a little easier, a little healthier to engage with people, because you're not wrapped up in so many preconceived ideas and notions of how you think the world should be. So I'm going to stop there. I'd rather just open up to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind that I can address. I'd always prefer to use your thoughts or questions and go off of that.
I have a question. Why is the Buddha have her hand or his like that and the other one on his knee like that?
You look at this one here.
Yeah.
So that is a couple ways to explain this. That statue is not the Buddha. It is what's called a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva means enlightened being. In a Western context, think of it as like an angel in a way. But in Buddhism, the bodhisattva path and the practice is the vow is to liberate all sentient beings from suffering. So the technical vow as a bodhisattva is to be reborn life after life until all beings are free from suffering. Sounds easy, right? Yeah, that's it. In many Buddhist or bodhisattva statues, the mudras and hand gestures do actually have a meaning. In that one specifically, to my knowledge, the left hand on the knee means absolutely nothing. The right hand is holding what's called a rui scepter. It represents wisdom. So in that particular statue, the location of the hands don't necessarily have a meaning. Very often you'll see the Buddha in what's called the jhana mudra, sitting in meditation. Very often you'll see the hand up, which represents fearlessness. They very often are a time where the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree for 21 days. He was challenged by Mara. Mara in the story is like, but it's really his mind, which maybe he never found there either, right? And that's the idea, is that the mind brings up all these challenges. So Mara throws arrows at him. The Buddha sits, meditation, contemplation, and the hand comes up, the arrows turn to lotus petals and fall to the ground. So it represents fearless, right? Another thing Mara does is begins to rain hail, thunderstorm down on him. And a king cobra, they call them nagas, underwater shape-shifting serpents, but also known as like king cobras, came up underneath him. So you'll see statues where he's sitting on like the tail of a cobra, and then a 7-headed cobra covers him and protects him to show us that what we actually fear, if we shift our mind a little bit, could maybe protect us. Another one with the meditation is Mara begins to dance all his beautiful daughters in front of him, thinking that they would tempt him with lust and desire, and he simply just remains in meditation, not moved at all. And in the story, they turned to stone, and that was it, right? The last one is the Buddha, as he's sitting, Mara then says, "Who bears witness to you defeating me? Nobody can defeat me. I am the great Mara." And the Buddha simply goes to touch the earth to show that the earth is his witness. And then, as the story goes, the earth trembled and shook, and Mara went away, and he overcame all suffering. So in most cases, and you can even just Google mudras, there's another one where the Buddha sits like this. It represents the turning of the first teaching, Dharma Chakra mudra, first turning of the Dharma wheel. So very often they have very heavy symbolic meanings. Yeah, for sure.
What's that one?
So the Kuan Yin often is, the middle one is Kuan Yin. And so Kuan Yin's name means hear of the world's cries. The Dalai Lama, they say, is the literal rebirth, reincarnation of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin hears all the suffering in the world and then pours out compassion to heal. In Asian culture beyond Buddhism, Kuan Yin is seen as a goddess of mercy and compassion. There's a beautiful story where they say that in Vietnam, when they were running from the refugee camps, they looked up into the sky and they saw Kuan Yin. You'll see images of this, but they saw Kuan Yin on a cloud. And the cloud was a dragon. And then Kuan Yin was on the dragon. And it was a sign of them being led to safety. So Kuan Yin is a very strong, beautiful image in Asian culture. Specifically in Buddhism, they say the two wings of the teachings are wisdom and compassion. So wisdom is represented by Manjushri. Compassion is represented by Kuan Yin. And Kuan Yin, not always, but is very often seen holding or pouring out a vase. So it's considered the vase of compassion. And that we all know we need more compassion in our lives, everywhere. Yeah.
What's this part?
It's represents. It's like the lotus mudra, which represents the peaceful mind, the mind coming out of the mud. So you think about sitting on the lotus. Think of a lotus flower, right? What's a lotus flower come from? Mud. Anyone's mind ever in the mud? Right? So out of the mud blossoms a beautiful flower. Our mind often in the mud. With practice, the mind can become beautiful as well. But it's not easy. They're just representations, reminders to practice. In this one, the Samantabhadra is great diligence, and the 6 tusks on the elephant represent the 6 paramitas: practice of generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. They call it the Bodhisattva practice: generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. 6 things that I know everyone in this room is phenomenal at, so won't spend any more time exploring those, especially the patience one. You all got that down, right? Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
So what's with the guy in front of?
Here we go, the statue night. I can turn these into teachings as well, so it's great. So the guy, right, the starving one, the answer to this. You're just wanting me to tell the story. So, and many people, this is their favorite story. All right. So who here does not know the story of the emaciated Buddha? So enough of you. All right. So when the Buddha was roaming the base of the Himalayan mountains, I'll sum up the story, right? He's roaming the base of the Himalayan mountains. He leaves home at 29, 6 years, roams around, says, I'm going to figure out how to awaken, like everybody in India was trying to do back then. And eventually, he was traveling with these 5 dudes, and they thought that if they ate 1 grain of rice a day and basically starved themselves, that they would overcome suffering. They thought that overcoming the attachment to the physical form was what was important, right? This was the Hindu, their way in the Hindu practice at that time and their belief. Not that the Hindu practice taught that, but as Hindus, that was their practice. And so, or a practice, I should say. So it said they ate 1 grain of rice a day. And he became so emaciated, so skinny that you could take your fingers front to back and your fingers would touch. They were pretty hungry, right? So as the story goes, the Buddha came to a riverbed and somebody offered him food. And they were like, no, we can't eat. You know, we're trying to overcome an attachment to the physical form. And the Buddha was like, and I'm paraphrasing all of this, but he said something to the effect of, well, I'm hungry, right? And so he said, I'm going to take the bowl and I'm going to put it in the stream. And if the bowl goes against the stream, I'm going to eat. So he sets the bowl in the stream, bowl goes against the stream, and he decides to eat. Those 5 dudes, they left him. They were like, you're a sellout, you're a traitor, you're a food eater, I can't believe you would eat. So at this point in time, he begins to eat, he regains his physical health. Shortly thereafter, he sits under the Bodhi tree, he has the awakening, he begins to understand why he suffers. But what this does at this point in time with him eating is it introduces what we call the middle path, right? How many of you have 20 plus pairs of shoes? Come on, be brave. Only 1, 2 people in here, right? Phenomenal. I don't believe you. How many of you are afraid to raise your hand and you have more than 20 pairs of shoes? Who's in that category? I see a lot more hands going up. That's all, the ones who are afraid, right? So could you live with 10 pairs of shoes and survive? And that would mean 10 people who don't have shoes actually could have shoes, right? Think about all the shirts you have. I'm not saying get rid of them all. But if you have 40 shirts, do you need all 40 of them? Maybe you keep 20 and 20 people get shirts that don't have shirts. Think of when you go out for a meal. Maybe you spend $20, maybe you spend $50, whatever your lifestyle is. Maybe you spend half and use the other half to actually buy food for somebody who's hungry, right? Middle path balance is extremely important in our lives. Often we tend to like burn ourselves out one way or burn ourselves out the other way. This life of extremes. The Buddha himself, he was a prince. So he had all the wealth, all the riches, all the money, all the clothes, all the women. He had everything. And then he went to the complete opposite extreme, left it all, put on a robe that was sewn together from patches of clothing, and lived with 7 items, right? And was starving himself. So even for him, he discovered a middle path with the food. And to me, the most important teaching around the middle path is to ask ourselves, where physically, mentally, emotionally are we starving ourselves? Where do we need to put a little more attention? Where do we need to focus on? Do we need to feed ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually a little bit more? Or are we so wrapped up in kind of this material world, thinking that the things we have mean something? That the things we have are going to bring us happiness? Are we burning ourselves out trying to take care of so many other people that we don't even pay attention to ourselves? So middle path balance, taking it completely away from the Buddha's life, is really for us as individuals to explore, where do I lack balance in my life? And there's a pretty good chance if you're here on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock that somewhere in your life, you might lack a little bit of balance, right? Safe bet, usually. Unless you got dragged here, but I don't think you were dragged. You know? So it's pretty good odds that that's occurring. Let me fit. Yeah, did you have I saw a hand. I don't see a body with a hand. I just saw a hand. No? Okay. So when we picked the emaciated Buddha statue, for us, when we started 13 years ago, it was important because, you know, we were young kids, starving ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, but we liked Buddhism. We thought it was cool. And so it represented, instead of having this like, you know, big Buddhist statue that was already awakened, it was inspiring to us that if this dude in one life could go from nearly dying, nearly starving himself to death, to figuring out why he suffered and reducing or eliminating his suffering, that was very inspiring to us. So instead of sitting with this awakened Buddha, it was like we're sitting with a buddy who figured it out. And that spoke very loudly to us because we too, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in our lives at times near death. And to be real with that. often Buddhism and this kind of spiritual world in 2019 in San Diego and California and all over this country can get really lost in what Chogyam Trungpa called, there's a great book, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. You know, that we can get lost in kind of this facade of Buddhism. That if we wear the certain clothes or we wear the certain things or we, you know, bow to people or say namaste or om a lot, that means we're like spiritual, you know? I don't even consider myself a spiritual person, and I've been doing this stuff a long time. I just consider myself somebody who grew up really mean and angry and pissed off at people and have worked really hard to be nice. I don't call that a spiritual experience. I just call that my journey. So I don't view this stuff as like some grand spiritual thing. I view it as holding up a mirror and looking back at yourself and asking yourself, why do you do what you do? Why do you say what you say? Why do you think what you think? Why do you act the way you do? And what's your intention behind everything you do? Is the intention filled with greed, anger, ignorance, or is it filled with compassion, loving kindness, generosity? What are your actions filled with? Yeah.
What is the difference between that and spirituality?
I don't know. How would you define spirituality? Or how would you define spirituality? I don't know either. So we're 0 for 2. Anyone else how would you define spirituality? Like, and I mean that very seriously. Like, I know a lot of people will say, I like Buddhism because it's not religious, it's spiritual. And to be honest with you, I don't even know what that expression means. So what does spiritual mean to you all? Not looking for a right or wrong definition, just, yeah.
So for me, I was Christian before this. Spiritual would be like Jesus Christ. And like it embodies you, like it envelops you. You become one with Jesus Christ.
With Jesus. Yeah.
And for me, like you said, they say it's spiritual. For me, I like Buddhism because it's a way of life.
Yeah. And that, yeah, thank you for clarifying or giving us an example of what spiritual is. And that's a perfect example. And then tying to the next part of it's a way of life. And I think that's why if you look at the 2 definitions you just gave, becoming one with Jesus and just a way of life, those are 2 very different things, right? That's to me why Buddhism is the guy himself said, don't believe it just because I'm saying it. He said, try this stuff. See if it works for you. Put it into your life and practice it. Question everything. He taught, and then he said, question this stuff, challenge this stuff, see if it works for you. So yeah, very much a way of life. What else? What does spiritual mean to you all? Yeah.
So spiritual to me means think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds.
Right.
Whereas religion means do it this way.
There you go. Yeah. And it's funny how you pointed the finger, do this way, being told. Yeah.
If I could tell a story about you and
But we're out of time, actually. Sorry.
and what spirituality means to me.
Sure.
You just said that you don't see yourself as a spiritual person. This is a walk you're on.
Yeah.
But when the statues were new, you said that you looked at them kind of in a, I don't know how you phrased it, but in this sort of unemotional way. They were pretty, it was a gift, and the gift meant a lot to you. But when you sat down
I know what you're going to say.
and began, doing what we're doing now,
When I felt.
you felt
Yeah.
a presence behind you. The starving guy's been there for a while.
Yeah.
But behind the starving guy is the spirit of compassion.
Right.
And that's what I think spirituality is, being willing to be open to experiences that you really can't explain.
There you go.
And to try to explain them almost loses a bit of the experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, appreciate that. And that's kind of why I threw out the question, because I think, I don't have the answers. I sit up here week after week for years making stuff up and sharing what I think Buddhism is. But it's hard for me to respond to what is spirituality because I don't view it that way. But yes, I do remember that night where I talked about that the pouring of the vase. And when we first set it all up and the vase was pouring out onto the starving Buddha, and then I felt like then it was pouring out onto me and pouring out onto all of us. So in that moment, I guess one could say that that moment to me would be like a spiritual experience, I guess, which would be really, or I would just call it a really cool, I don't know what I would call it, but it was a real cool experience. Spirituality. I just always find it interesting the way people, the semantics of this stuff. Zen practice, life as it is, that's a spiritual experience in and of itself, everything. Every conversation you have, every argument you have, every traffic jam you're in, every person who makes your coffee at Starbucks that doesn't do it the way you want it to. Like all of those interactions and those moments, those are incredible experiences that only occur once for the most part. No moment ever occurs again. And I think that's the beauty of life, is that we experience these things and then we're left with, what is our interpretation? Do we see it as good, as bad, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, right, wrong? And then the mind kicks in and we start to try to label and judge and critique. Other questions, thoughts? Yeah.
An example of spirituality. I am a practicing Christian. I'm an Episcopalian. And in the past 3 days, I have used your story about getting used to the kiddie rides instead of the adult rides at the amusement park.
Yeah.
And I think of that as a spiritual experience, because I have the ability to take within my religious life all sorts of help and all sorts of experiences from other people.
Mm-hmm.
And just having that happen is really healthy.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, the kiddie ride metaphors, I often define Buddhism as, for me, that our life is like these roller coaster rides. We often push for these extreme highs. That's great, the big rush, and everything just comes crashing down. We think life sucks again, and then we're seeking and craving, desiring the big rush, the going out, the celebration, the party, wherever we're at in our lives, and then we crash again the next day. So like these constant, life is like a roller coaster ride, lots of highs and lots of lows. And to me, where this practice really began to, I think, make a change in my life was when I stopped riding the roller coaster and I got on the kiddie ride at Disneyland. It's not fun, it's not exciting, but nobody gets hurt. Somebody's probably been hurt on the kiddie ride, but in my metaphor, it still kind of works.
And it takes patience.
It takes patience because it's really slow. Yeah.
What if we really love those highs?
I'm not suggesting that you don't love those highs. What I'm suggesting is that what I've learned from this practice is you can love those highs, but then you better also learn to love and appreciate the lows. Otherwise, you're going to suffer a lot, right? It's like, and I just said this on Saturday too, but a handful of months ago or so, there was a young kid, and he'd been practicing, learning this stuff, I don't know, a few months or whatever. And he started asking a question one day, and he said something about, things have been going really, really good the last couple months. I'm worried, like, what if it doesn't stay that way? And I said, it's not going to stay that way, right? So I think, to me, the important part of this practice is not to think that the highs are bad or wrong, but to understand that with the highs come the lows. And to apply what the Buddhist teaching on impermanence is to understand that when we're in those high moments in life, love it, appreciate it, all of it, but know that it won't stay. And know that everything that comes together for a period of time, every experience, every moment, every high in life, everything comes together for a period of time and then ceases to exist. So what that does is it gives us an incredible sense of appreciation and gratitude for those, what we would call high, beautiful moments. The danger is then when one crashes, how are we in those moments, right? And so for me as a practitioner, I got tired of seeking and craving the highs to then drastically fall to the lows. And it was a much healthier path for me to just have an even balance.
And how do we let go of that?
How do you let go of what? Of chasing the highs?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I wish I could sum that up in 10 minutes. The question of how do we get rid of the highs? That's what this entire practice is about. And let me clarify that. It doesn't mean to get rid of all the fun stuff in your life. But the Buddha taught that we suffer because craving and desire. That's what causes our suffering. we're constantly seeking, craving, and desiring something, someone, some other place. And we very rarely actually just stop and appreciate and be with where we are. How we do that is beginning to cut through the ego, cut through the pride, cut through this idea that life is supposed to be something different than what it is, because your life is exactly what it is. To want it to be different than what it is right now is actually impossible. If you want it to be different in the future, then you become very mindful of what you do now. Right? How you do it is that's the journey. That's what the practice is. Cut through pride, cut through ego, have a gratitude and appreciation for the present moment. Recognize that, the shoes you have now will probably last you your entire life, but you probably won't keep them your whole life. That sweatshirt you're wearing would probably, last you for like 20 years.
I did thought, I don't know whose it is.
Right. But so to me, the practice is to look at little things in our lives to recognize that we seek and crave and desire simple little things all day long. Right? And they'll all fade away at some point in time. And are we okay with that? If we're not, you're going to struggle a lot. Other thoughts, questions, that or anything? Yeah.
Did the Buddha see a significant difference between empathy and compassion?
So first, I'll put my asterisk that says I have no idea what the Buddha saw. I mean, I knew you figured that was coming, but my understanding or what I've learned or what I take from Buddhist teachings around empathy and compassion. Let me start with empathy first. I think for me, I often confused empathy with like sympathy and pity. And so I would say, maybe I'm having empathy for someone, but what I'm really having is like sympathy for them or pity for them. To me, empathy is to basically empathize with, to feel with, to be with them and where they are in that moment, beyond judgment, beyond label, beyond critique. To empathize with someone is to almost walk in their shoes and be with them. I'm just kind of talking this through. Compassion, to me, has really nothing to do with walking in their shoes. In a way, it's actually the opposite to me, meaning I don't have to experience what it's like to walk in your shoes. I don't want to experience what it's like to walk in your shoes. I don't want to, I don't need to, I don't like to, but I'm still going to have compassion for you. Think about people you have empathy for. Have you ever had empathy for somebody you completely hate? Probably not. Maybe.
Yeah, and healthcare, it's
Well,
it's
yeah. There you go. Yeah, you're in a great field to have empathy and compassion for people that you're caring for, right? So I guess I walked into that one. But what I was thinking with that was that often we try to empathize with people that we know and love, and we want to kind of be there with them. And so it's a lot easier to have compassion for them. Compassion, as the Buddha taught us, to have compassion for everybody. Empathy as well, but I'm seeing those two as slightly different things, maybe even drastically different. To have endless compassion for the people you just don't like. And there's probably a lot of people in this world that we don't like. I don't know, maybe we're scared of them, maybe we're threatened by them, maybe they don't have our views, maybe they challenge us, maybe we think they're ignorant, maybe we think they're all kinds of terrible things, and maybe they are. But can we still have compassion for them? I don't know. Yeah.
Hey, my understanding of compassion is that when you look at somebody who's in pain or suffering, that you want it to end, that you want to help them to no longer feel, you don't have to feel it, but you want to help them to stop suffering, and then also to act in a way that will do that.
Right.
Through sending meta, or if you can actually intervene or whatever. Just-
Yeah, so the way you're saying it, almost like compassion is more of, it's an action. It's almost like becomes a verb, it becomes something you do. Are you saying that as opposed to maybe empathy is just kind of feeling something, being with something or someone?
Feeling it with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Not so much a
It's
doing.
It's a form of compassion, but it's not
Sure,
all.
yeah. Does that help as well? Probably, yeah. Better than what I said. Yeah, we'll go here and here and then we'll wrap
Just
up.
when I think of these two terms, the compassion, comes to mind that, yeah, there's an action in it, and it feels like real kindness towards someone, even if I don't want to. It's like really showing the kindness either through my actions or through my words. And when I empathize, sometimes I don't have empathy. Sometimes we think we have to have something that is the same as them. But if I listen, I try to find something that I remember my experience ending up in the same feeling as what they're feeling. So the two experiences can be totally different, but they've expressed their feeling. And I can think of something where, I felt that way, doing something completely different, and then there's a connection. Then the empathy hits, and like everything else, that it seems I'm just quiet, and that works. That's just different.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, definitely, like, someone who has had their heart broken, well, most of us we didn't have it done the way they did, but most of us know what that's like, right? That's kind of what you're saying. Yeah, we can feel that experience because we've been there. Yeah.
So I'll try to make this quick.
Sorry.
But working in the renewables industry, our enemy is people who are actually ruining this planet. So it's obviously hard to have compassion for something you believe is truly wrong, and the effects are currently right in front of us. So having compassion for those people, does that, I don't even know what's kind of form that looks like.
Yeah. The question basically, working in renewable energy, if you didn't hear it, the enemy is the people that are destroying the planet, how to have compassion for them. Is that kind of your question? Yeah. That's tough. But a couple things I'll say is that, like you said, and how it's often phrased in this type of situation, in your heart and your mind, you know to be true one thing, and in your heart and your mind, you believe they are wrong, right? What do you think they think? They think the exact opposite. And this isn't about this isn't about who's right or wrong. It's to understand. That's the wisdom. The wisdom of Buddhist practice is to understand that everybody who thinks differently than we think thinks that way because of their conditions, their upbringing, their environment, their family, their friends, what their education was, whatever it might be. So if we can first begin to understand that the people you're talking about are probably never going to agree with you. What that does is it allows you to go into a situation wise enough to know that they're not going to agree with you. And the compassion comes in because if you go in with anger, so we overcome anger with compassion, 3 poisons, greed, anger, ignorance. We overcome anger with compassion. If you go into these environments and dealing with these people and you're filled with anger and hatred and rage, and you think they're just dumb and stupid and don't care about the planet, how well is that going to work out? Not very well. Because then what you've done is you've taken what you see in them, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but what you're seeing in them is anger and stupidity and whatever words you're putting on them, right? Then what you're doing is you're getting angry, and now you're bringing the anger to them. So the anger that you see them bringing towards the planet, you're now bringing that anger to them. You see them destroying the planet, but in the anger that goes towards them, you're destroying them.
And they just see that.
And that's all they see. Compassion towards those we disagree with or argue with or don't like or whatever doesn't mean that you're saying you think they're correct.
Okay.
You understand that? It doesn't mean that you have to like surrender your views. It just means that you're going to have love and compassion and kindness and understanding Because the only way you're going to get people to actually change, it's not fair for me to say it, a way that you're going to get people to actually change what they think would be to listen to them. To actually sit down with them and say, why do you think this way? And to let them ramble on and on and on. And instead of in your head playing this dialogue or story of like, you're wrong, you're stupid, the planet's on fire, you're wrong, you're stupid, right? In your mind, you've already like got all of your responses laid out. Try not to do any of that. And actually listen to where they're coming from. Why do they think this way? What about their life or their views or whatever makes them think this way? And if you can begin to understand that, at least now you've opened up a dialogue and a communication that isn't filled with two parties hating each other's views. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely provides a middle.
A middle path. Is it easy? No, it's not. It's extremely difficult. We can just think about any argument you've been in your life. Very often when we're in an argument, we don't want to just sit there and listen to the other person.
That's losing.
That's losing, right? Says the attorney. So listen. Part of the practice also with compassion is to be patient, right? Be patient with your patients. Be patient as we begin to kind of explore why people think the things they do. And that's, yeah.
The sad part in that is that we listen, but we also have expectation.
Yes. We listen, we have the expectation, right? So in that scenario, we listen, but just because we listen doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're going to get what you want. Right? You're going to listen, but they're still not going to agree with you. That's the sad part. Yes, I'm agreeing with you 100%. That's where I'll close with this. That's where, to me, Thich Nhat Hanh is really great. We talked about engaged Buddhism and approaching, when you look at social justice issues and all these things that we're talking about, if you approach it with compassion and understanding and listening, as opposed to anger and hatred and rage, is the only way that, or a great way that things can change a little bit. Nobody likes being told they're wrong. Nobody responds well to that. So there is a balance, there's a middle path, there's a way to begin to engage with dialogue that's healthy. And I'm not even talking about global issues. I'm also just talking about dialogue with friends and family and, relationships and things like that. These things apply to that first and foremost as well. So good luck with all that. So we'll join palms. For the benefit of this practice, be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most.